Isaiah 55, 1 through 5. Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread and your labor on what does not satisfy? Listen to me, and eat what is good, and you will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Listen that you may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a ruler and commander of the peoples. Surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations you do not know will come running to you because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has endowed you with splendor. Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, and he cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to the disciples, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And Jesus said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children.
Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us online at Hamline Chapel today. Appreciate you pulling up this video and logging on and viewing it today and participating in our online time of just worship and opening up of the scriptures together this morning. We really appreciate you being a part of this online service today. We look forward to a day when we can be back together in person, but know that for everybody's safety and looking out for one another, this is the best way for us to kind of gather together at this time. I want to let you know that you can join us right after this if you're watching this Sunday at around 11. Every Sunday at 11:30 following the posting of this video, our church gathers together through a Zoom call. And there's details for that Zoom call wherever you found this posted. And at 11:30 you click that link and you can hop on and join us and participate in conversation with real people. It's not in the flesh, but it's good to see each other on the screen and to have conversation and to connect with each other that way. So we've been working through the book of Matthew the last few weeks, and we've heard some stories that Jesus told, some farming parables that he shared with his disciples about what his kingdom's like and what it's like to follow him. And today in Matthew's gospel, the reading that you just heard, we actually hear a story not from Jesus, but a story about Jesus in Matthew's gospel. And it starts off, what you heard read was in verse 13, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. So it says when Jesus heard what had happened, we're kind of jumping in the middle of a story here. What had just happened that Jesus heard about was that his cousin, John the Baptist, had just been killed by Herod. And we learned that John was actually beheaded by Herod at a big party he was throwing at his house. And you can read about it at the beginning of chapter 14 in Matthew's gospel. But we hear that Jesus had just gotten word that his cousin had been killed. And Jesus probably, in hearing what had happened to John the Baptist, had a feeling of what might be in store for him in the future, along with the pain of just losing a friend, a family member. And so it says that Jesus withdrew to a private place. He was looking for a solitary place, some time alone. Our church this week, we've experienced the hit of grief, and we're still experiencing that today. A friend of ours, a member of our church, Jerry Martin, passed away this week, and we mourn and we grieve together the loss of our friend. And we know that when we gather together, there will be an empty spot in his pew and in our choir where he once was. And we all miss his smile, his stories, his laughter, the joy that he could bring by just walking into a room. And so we can understand a little bit of grief this week as we read this passage and we reflect on our friendship with our friend Jerry. And we have there are some plans in the works for a memorial service, a funeral service that is going to happen in the future, and we'll share some information on that with you as that information becomes available. But know that there's some things in the work for a time for us to be able to remember and celebrate and look forward to resurrection as we celebrate the life of our friend Jerry. And so we'll keep you informed and in the loop on that. But we understand what it's like to just want to be alone. We understand what it's like to grieve and just want to find a solitary place, a place to just get away, to be quiet, to be alone, to gather our thoughts, to pray. And Jesus in this passage, he's doing the same thing. He's grieving his friend, his cousin has died, has been killed. He just wants to get away. And it tells us that he gets in a boat looking for this quiet place. But it tells us that the crowds heard that Jesus was in his boat and he was going. And it says that they followed him on foot from the towns. And we're told that when Jesus landed on the shore and he saw the crowd, he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. It means like that compassion word in there, it tells us like he felt like this pain in his gut, like this aching inside of him for the people around him. And it's pretty fascinating to me and pretty powerful to me that Jesus was able to take and transform his own grief and his own pain and his time of sorrow. And he wasn't just focused on himself, but somehow was able to transform that into compassion for the people around him. And he began to heal their sick. And I'm sure he's talking, and there's large crowds that are there that day. It says that evening approaches, and the disciples came to Jesus, these followers of his that he was training to be like him. And I'm sure they were pretty proud of themselves, what they came up with. They came and told Jesus, they said, this place that we're at, it's remote, and it's getting late. And we think we should send these crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. I'm sure they were patting themselves on the back thinking, man, Jesus is going to be so happy with us. We're thinking about the people. We're thinking about how we can meet the needs of people. And man, I bet we got an A on the exam and Jesus is going to be so happy with us because we recognize this need and we have a solution for it. People can just leave and then they'll be able to go feed themselves and eat and take care of themselves. And how often is that our solution for things? You know, like, hey, we can help people. We see a need, and maybe if you go over there, they'll be able to help you. Hey, I see that you're hungry. Maybe you can go over there and they'll feed you. Hey, I see that you need a place to stay. Maybe you can call this number and they'll give you a place to stay. We've gotten pretty good at outsourcing solutions to our people problems. When I was in college, I attended university in Nashville, Tennessee, and at the time, there were a lot of homeless people around Nashville. And you'd go to a coffee shop, you'd go to a restaurant, you'd go to the park, wherever you went, and you would be confronted by homelessness. And oftentimes, you'd have people asking for money and change and that sort of things. And it got to be every time you went out, you would bump into a homeless person. And you know, you as a Christian have some of this kind of Christian guilt that was inside of me when I was there. Like, I can't just blow these people off. I can't ignore them. They're image bearers of God. They're people that Jesus died for and loves, and I can't just shove them aside. But then it's kind of inconvenient when I'm trying to get my latte and some guy's wanting my change. And so I came up with what I thought at the time was just this great, brilliant idea. I started giving just a couple bucks to the Nashville Rescue Mission. And I gave money there. And so whenever I was confronted by someone that was homeless while I was in the city, I had the excuse to say, I gave money to the homeless shelter. And why don't you check out Nashville Rescue Mission? And they're all over town. They're doing great things. And I give money to them, and they'll be able to help you. I never once went and volunteered at the mission. I never partnered with the work they were doing. I just gave a couple bucks so I could get rid of the guilt of ignoring homeless people. And I kind of feel that that's sort of like the solution the disciples came up with that day. Like, man, we see that there's a problem and it's about to get really inconvenient for us if we don't do something about it. But man, it's going to cost a lot of money to feed these people. It could be inconvenient. Where are we going to get the food? And so they come up with this idea and tell Jesus, hey, let's just send them away so they can go to town and go feed themselves. Like, we're so smart. And Jesus just turns it all upside down on them like he does. And Jesus replied to them, he says, they don't need to go away. Don't send them away. Don't outsource your problem. You give them something to eat. I wonder if they're like, but Jesus, like, you want us to deal with this? You want us to feed all of these people? Jesus says, you deal with that. You give them something to eat. And so they say to Jesus, we know from John's gospel that that a little boy gives them this food. It says, we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. And I kind of wonder if it was an excuse. Like, hey, Jesus, we can't feed them. We tried to figure it out. This is all we've got. Like, let's go back to plan A. Let's send them all away. And I wonder if that was kind of their thinking, was this is all we could come up with. We don't have very much. Let's still outsource this. And Jesus responds to them. He says, you got 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish? Bring it to me. I wonder, and it tells us that he directed the people to sit down on the grass, and he took those 5 loaves and the 2 fish. It says that he looked up to heaven, and he gave thanks, and he broke the loaves. And then he gave it to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. I wonder if Jesus is saying to us, to the things that we recognize in the world are problems. We recognize brokenness and we recognize pain around us. And we say, Jesus, we should just send it to these experts because they can handle it. And Jesus says, no, you deal with it. And you say, yeah, but Jesus, I can't because I don't have much expertise and I don't know how to. And Jesus says, well, bring it to me. So you're like, what? Oh, okay, here you go, Jesus. It says that he thanks God for it and he blesses what little we bring to him and he breaks it and he gives it back to us and he says, go and do something with it. A few years after I had graduated college, I was in the city of Indianapolis with some friends. And I was working at a youth camp, and we were doing prayer walks in the city of Indianapolis downtown. We had a inner city kind of ministry group that would take our kids downtown at night and walk them around and show them where homeless people lived in Indianapolis. And our students would see the homeless people, and they'd have opportunity to pray for them as they walked. But they never engaged. They never talked. And while we were on those tours, one of my friends who was working at the camp with me said, I feel like we need to do more than just walk around and pray, and not making light of prayer, because it's a powerful thing when we pray, and we're called to pray, and things happen when we pray. But he says we could do some substantive things, and we could build relationships with people. We could get to know some of these people. So one of those nights after we went back to the campground, my friend and I left. We went back to Pan Am Plaza, downtown Indianapolis. And we went to a spot where we had seen some homeless men earlier in the evening, and we found these guys and sat down on a bench, struck up a conversation with them. Came to find out that their names were Sean and Steve, and they'd been living there, and they worked as ushers at basketball games, and just got to know their stories a little bit. And each night, the rest of the week of that camp, we would go and we'd hang out on the park bench with Sean and Steve. Eventually, we knew it was Father's Day weekend was when we were hanging out with these guys, and we thought, man, what do they need? And we went to a store and bought socks, and we bought shoes, and just a couple other things that we'd kind of pieced together that we knew that they needed while living out on the streets. And we showed up, and we delivered these socks and shoes and other things to our new friends, Sean and Steve. And they wept as we gave them these things. And their lives were just broken. And in that brokenness, we gave what little we had, just some time and a couple bucks for some sneakers from Meijer. And brought these grown men to tears as they said, man, we haven't had a relationship with anyone in a long time. We haven't had anyone even acknowledge us on Father's Day in years. And thank you guys for taking this time. It's not a pat on my back, because it's pretty lame that I'd spent my life just giving a couple bucks thinking I was doing something good. And it probably helped and did some good. But what Jesus wants us to do isn't to just outsource our ministry, hire other people to do the work that he's called us to. But Jesus actually wants us to get in and to get involved and to do something. And he wants to take what even little bit we have. He wants to bless it and break it, give it back to us, and send us out to do the work that he wants done. And so maybe you've looked at the world and you've realized, man, there's a real problem of kids growing up without parents. And what can I do about it? Did you know in our own church, we have people that volunteer for big brothers and big sisters. They say, hey, I'll invest in a kid's life so that they can have a healthy adult relationship. I'll give my time to do that. And those people find, man, I only have like a little bit of time to do something like that. And they give it and they see that God breaks it and blesses it and he uses it and he multiplies it in somebody's life. There's other people in our church that man, they're like, there's people that are alone, there's people that are sad and lonely, and people that just need encouraged. And I can't get out, I can't do as much as I'd like to do, but they say, I know how to write cards. And so they say, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to pray for you and praying, which is good, say, what can I do? And so they actively seek out people that need encouragement and send cards and say, hey, I'm praying for you. And they offer what they have to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, I can't get out. I can't go to the places I want to go. I can't be as active and involved as I'd like, but I can write cards. And Jesus says, okay, give it to me. And there are lots of you that have probably received cards from people in our church that say, Jesus, you can take this. And lots of you have been blessed by those cards, have been encouraged, have been lifted up. There's some people in our church that said, man, there are actually people in our town that are hungry. And what can we do to help it? And they could say, maybe we could give gift cards or we could do whatever. But they actually have said at our church, what if we opened our doors and once a week we just said, anybody that's hungry, come and eat? What a Jesus thing to do. And I know with COVID and all these things going on, we haven't been able to offer that ministry, but it will happen again. And maybe there's opportunities for us to think and be creative about, well, what can we do since we can't do that right now? But there's a group of people in our church that said there are hungry people, and instead of sending them away, let's feed them. What are the things that cause us just aches in our bellies? What are things that are broken in our world? Whether it's relationships or things or systems, what are there things in our world that are just broken and we're tempted to say, go over there and they'll help you and they'll fix it? Maybe Jesus is calling you to enter into it and to say, you know what, come to my house. You know what, let me give you a call. You know what, I'll make you some food. You know what, I can do this. What's Jesus calling us to as his followers today? Has there been something, is there something that you're looking at right now that you're just doing as a way to avoid actually getting your hands dirty? And maybe Jesus is saying, you know what? I want you to be the solution to this problem, not send it somewhere else. I want you to be a source of hope and love and life to some people. I don't want you to just send them away. I want you to enter in and get your hands dirty, and you to dig around and say, what do I have? What have I been given? What can I use? What can I offer to Jesus and say, take this and use it? To have Jesus' blessing break and give back to me to go out into the world. My brothers and sisters, Jesus is calling us to love and to serve our neighbors in our community. And we cannot be people that just sit back and say, hey, somebody else will take care of this. Somebody else will deal with these issues and these problems. Jesus is calling us to offer what we have to him so that he can bless it, break it, give it back to us, and send us out into the world to help usher in his kingdom, to be a living just example of his presence, living proof of his presence in our community and our world. See, the world doesn't need more people to just push problems off on somebody else. God's kingdom isn't set up for people to say, somebody else take care of it. But we need to be people that actively enter into the brokenness, the pain, the struggles in the world and say, I don't have much, but Jesus, I offer it to you. Please do something with it. Friends, what is Jesus calling you to? It's time to quit making excuses and quit pushing things off to someone else. Where can you get your hands dirty? Where can you dig in? Where can you get involved? What is Jesus calling you to do? Hey, thanks for joining us online this week. I'd love for you to post in the comments maybe below if there's something that Jesus is speaking to your heart about. Maybe there's something that you've kind of pushed off to somebody else. But Jesus says, oh no, don't push it off. Enter in. Hey, may God bless you this week. Thanks for logging on. Thanks for watching us. Hey, there's some contact info at the end of this if you need to reach somebody at the church. And we'd love, if it's Sunday at 11:30, for you to hop on our Zoom call and be a part of conversation and prayer with other people. So thanks for logging on. Thanks for watching. And we love you, and may God bless you.